Support for Veterans Corner Radio is made possible by M&M Printing and the Observer News of Ruskin, Florida.
Welcome to Veterans Corner Radio, a show dedicated to providing information to all those who have served our country's military and to their families. Now, here is your host, combat veteran and educator, retired United States Air Force Lieutenant Colonel Joe Mulberger.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to today's show. I'm your host, Joe Mulberger, and today here on Veterans Corner Radio, we have an especially astute individual to present to you, none other than retired United States Navy Bill Kirkpatrick, a.k.a. Bullet, which should lend our audience members to understand that today we're going to be talking with a fighter pilot. And the old joke in the Air Force was, how do you know a fighter pilot's at your party? He'll tell you. Bill, welcome to today's show. Thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you, Joe. I appreciate it.
Tell us a little bit about yourself. When were you born and where were you born?
Well, I was born in 1951, Boston, Massachusetts, and my whole family came from that area. My father was Marblehead. My grandfather was Watertown. My mother was Newton. So a whole family born and raised in Boston area. So I was there until my dad, who worked for IBM, which stood for I've been moved up to New York, then Maine, and then the Washington, D.C. area, Rockville, Maryland. So we're all Bostonites.
Well, it sounds like you're a Bostonite, but you didn't carry the accent with you, so you must have dropped that along the way as you were moving.
Well, the Maryland area above Washington, D.C. was a melting point for everybody. So yes, I did drop it, but my father had not lived in Boston for probably 70 years, and he's still park your car in the Harvard Yard. So he never lost it.
Very nice. And I'm sure that lent to going back to Boston as you were growing up.
Well, I went to college there. I went to Tufts University, went there in 1969, and graduated in 73 with a engineering degree in electrical engineering and a commission in the United States Navy as ensign.
Wow. Now, what drove you to choose the Navy of all the service components?
Well, I was thinking about that. It was interesting because when I was a kid, I used to build plastic models, and they gravitated toward Navy plastic models, not necessarily fighters, but really like the PBY for some reason, and the Soviet airplanes. So maybe somewhere way back, that's what kind of lended me to joining the Navy. When I was getting ready to go to college, my best friend and I, we wanted to go to the Naval Academy, which was about a 45 to 1 hour drive from Rockville, Maryland. So Fred and I went there, and I really enjoyed it, but it just didn't seem like a good fit for me at the time. Now, Fred, who wanted to be an admiral, said, no, that's where I'm going. He got in, and I went ROTC, full scholarship ROTC at Tufts. And Fred, who was going to be an admiral, got out after his commitment, which was 6 years. I just wanted to fly, so my thought was I'd do my commitment, get out, fly for the airlines. Well, you just never know what's going to happen. I mean, Fred, who's going to be an admiral, got out. I stayed in for 21 years. So every time I came up for a set of orders, the Navy actually gave me what I asked for. So I couldn't get out. And thank goodness I didn't. It was a great, great career.
21 years. Tell us what officer candidate school was like for you.
Well, it was ROTC. And at the time, back in the early 60s, the Vietnam War was still raging. Boston was a hotbed. And so they told us, do not wear your hair short, military style. Do not wear your uniform down to the ROTC classes. So that went on for 4 years. They firebombed the ROTC building, and they told us just blend in, did not show that you're military.
Mm.
So it was kind of a crazy time.
So I mentioned the OCS thing for a reason. Traditionally, around that time frame, there was that aviators OCS, and I kind of assumed that maybe you went from the ROTC program into that. But tell us how you matriculated from Navy ROTC into flight school. That's probably a better way to couch that.
Okay, well, yeah, and I did have many friends, three of them that were fraternity brothers, and they did go through OCS after seeing what I had done. But for me, the sophomore year summer training for ROTC, they showed you what you could do in the Navy. One was go Marine Corps, which was interesting. Another one was flying submarines, and they had already showed you what you could do as a enlisted man on the ship my first summer. So flying was what I keyed on. I loved it. I actually had a little bit of capability in that. So first thing I did when I got back to college is I signed up for the FITSE program, which was a flight indoctrination program where they would send you to a FBO, flight base operator, and let you get your license, your FAA license. Well, I finished the first year. I'd gone through everything, my first couple of cross countries, and when I came back, they stopped the program. But what it did show is that I had an aptitude for flying. So that's what I put in for.
It sounds like some seeds may have been sprinkled along the way in your youth. Were you a part of any youth organizations that were associated with flying that sort of whet your appetite or anything like that?
No, I was a Cub Scout as soon as I could be a Cub Scout. Then I was a Boy Scout as soon as I could do that. And they did have an aviation merit badge, which I did not get at the time. Then after that, it was Navy, and then Civil Air Patrol was the last thing. So I've been in uniform for 50 years.
Wow.
But no, I don't key on that as being the impetus to get into flying.
So you leave college, you go into the Navy. How does that work where you go through the schooling to become a naval aviator?
Okay, well, I was what they call stashed in an E2 squadron for 6 months before my slot for aviation training down in Pensacola opened up. And that was an interesting thing to see how a squadron actually works. I did that, and then part-time, I went to Old Dominion to finish off a master's in economics, but it was a great experience. I went down to Pensacola, and the first thing they do is they give you indoctrination training into avionics and flight characteristics, and then you go to flight training. I got into a program which was all your flight training was in Pensacola, and half a day of flying, half a day of going to University of West Florida to get a master's. That was really, really a tough thing to do. All I wanted to do was fly, but you had to give up half the time and go to school. Well, luckily, just like flight training indoctrination at college, it was canceled. That program was canceled in the second year. So all I did was focused on flying. But because I'd been in the program, I was able to stay at Sherman Field the entire time, flying T2's basic jet and TA4J's advanced jet. So that was great. Pensacola is not a bad place to go through flight training. And I met my girlfriend at the time, my wife now for almost 50 years in Pensacola. So it was almost like Officer and a Gentleman.
Very nice indeed. What was the first aircraft that you were assigned to, and where was that you were assigned?
Well, I was a junior pilot right out of flight training, and I was assigned to VF 124 out of Miramar. Well, VF means fighter, VA was the attack squadron. And I'm going, oh, VF 124. I didn't know what it was. And I asked somebody, they said, oh, that's the F4 replacement air group. We call it a RAG. And I said, oh, F4s, that's great because they're going to transition to what I really wanted to fly, which was the F-14. Turns out it was the F-14 replacement air group. I found out a couple days later. And I was one of the newbies because what they had done, the airplane was new, and they had taken all the F-8, F-4 Vietnam pilots, put them into the airplane for the first year, and I showed up 2 years after the airplane had started flying. And that was my transition to the F-14.
And you said Miramar?
Miramar, that's San Diego.
And isn't that the same place that we give the heraldry from the Top Gun movie for
Well,
the school?
that's where the Top Gun school was.
Now,
Uh,
you were there in a organization separate from the Top Gun school, though, right? In your
I
first
was.
assignment there?
VF-124 was the replacement air group. As a nugget pilot, they make you into a fighter pilot, and then you go to your first squadron. And my first squadron was VF-2. VF-2, my call sign had been Bullet, and that was because I well, actually, my first call sign was Burner, and Burner was because I always used the afterburner in fights, and so I was, bingoing out of the, uh, area about 5 minutes before everybody else. But then VF2, it was Burner Bob Hickey was the XO, so you couldn't have 2 burners. So as a new guy, they said, "Well, the back end of the, jet is a, nozzle," so it was nozzle for about 6 months. And then I got my true call sign, and should I talk about that now?
Tell us about how you got this third and really eloquent call sign that tracks and still follows with you, Bullet.
Well, we were fighting a simulated fight over in a supersonic area near Las Vegas. And I was fighting against F-15, which is a super airplane. I mean, it came out about the same time as the Tomcat, but it was a true fighter. Whereas the Tomcat was a interceptor number one. It was a good fighter. And actually, a lot of people didn't know it was also designed as a bomber. So anyway, we were fighting against the F-15. We took forward quarter shots against each other, and I'm not going to turn with an F-14 or F-15. So I got down low, I got down supersonic, and doing that, it shrinks his launch acceptability range, so he could not shoot me rear quarter. I get back and I get up on the whiteboard and I start diagramming the fight. And I told everybody, I said, yeah, I got down low, I got down fast. He couldn't shoot me. I was supersonic. I was faster than a speeding bullet. And the reason I said that, in our NATOPS manual, you shoot one of your rounds, and if you're supersonic, 1.3 Mach, you'll catch up to your rounds in 6 seconds. So now I was supersonic. I go to the debriefing, and I said, I'm faster than a speeding bullet. There's no way you could have shot me. He said, absolutely, you're right. Unfortunately, we're about 6 miles outside the supersonic box. So now as faster than the speeding bullet turned into bullet.
Very nice. Very nice. And it's a story you can share and be proud of, whereas a lot of call signs are quite the opposite.
Yes, sir.
Well, thanks for sharing that story. So you end up at your first assignment as a fighter jock, and where else did the Navy take you?
Well, I was assigned to the USS Enterprise, and we did a cruise or deployment on the Enterprise. And it was one of the shortest deployments that I'd ever made. It was 6 months. We went to every port they talked about. There were no hot spots in the world at the time.
And what part of the world were you in with the Independence?
Well, with the Enterprise.
Enterprise, sorry.
Well, the Enterprise went to the Western Pacific, so we were in the Indian Ocean, we were in the Sea of Japan, and that type of area. So our port of call was Japan, Yokosuka, also Hong Kong, Singapore, and Australia. So,
Pretty hardcore stuff.
well, it was, and I thought that's the way the Navy was going to be.
And then,
Well, and then I rotated to the replacement air group as an instructor. Then my next squadron was as a department head, VF 51, that was on the USS Chucky V, we called it, Carl Vinson, which was a East Coast carrier that we picked up and went around the world. We went into the Med, down around the Horn of Africa, Indian Ocean, and then we had a couple of port calls, but it was there were long deployments. They were 10 months at a time. So we deploy for 10 months, turn around, go out for another 10 months.
wow, that's a lot of on the road.
Well, it was. And my son on the first deployment was 4 months old, and I come back and he's 14 months old. So, I give a lot of credit to my wife.
So the standard briefing could have been you can either be home to have the conceiving of your child, or you can be home for the birth, but not two.
True.
You're a combat veteran, correct?
Well, I was in Desert Shield, and I rotated from Desert Shield back to the test squadron, and then the balloon went up with Desert Storm. Although I did have an intercept in my first squadron, they had two MiG-21s coming out from Yemen, and I got within 10 miles. I was cleared to arm, not to fire, and then their GCI said, "No, you got a couple Tomcats coming toward you," and they turned around and went back to Yemen. So that's the closest that I got, but I still have the kneeboard card from that almost engagement.
Does the Navy consider that placing you in the situation where you're a combat veteran?
No, I didn't get any green ink in my logbook for that.
Okay. I know that the Navy it's steeped in a variety of histories, and there are a lot of rules of engagement that determine whether a person is or is not considered a combat vet.
No, so no, I was not ever a combat veteran.
But you do have a very unique aspect of your career where you were an instructor at the Top Gun school.
No, I went through Top Gun school as a student.
Tell us about Top Gun school as a student, since we all know the movie.
The Top Gun school, the premise was, and it started in 1968 because we had a 1 to 2 kill ratio against these Soviet fighters flown by the North Vietnamese. After Top Gun, it went to 22 to 1. So very effective school. And the theory behind it was they would take a junior pilot that showed some promise, send them to Top Gun, and now it was a graduate school in fighter tactics, Soviet weapons, and then you went back to the squadron as the subject matter expert and taught them what you had learned in Top Gun.
So you
So-
became the 50-pound brain, really educating the rest of the unit.
It was a phenomenal school, well received by everybody that went through it. So yes, now you are the subject matter expert, and you try to impart that knowledge.
When you had your near engagement in Yemen, was that before or after you had been through Top Gun?
That was after I'd been through Top Gun.
So you're able to utilize what you had learned in the school.
Well, yeah, it was interesting because we were, I was thinking about what we were going to do when we got to the merge. There were two of them, there were two of us, and then that they decided not to play. Unlike the Libyans with their MiG-23s crossing the line of death.
So we've got all this experience and this interaction going on. Break it down for us. The film Top Gun, you have a couple of cameos. Tell us a little bit about your moments in the film Top Gun.
Well, Top Gun was really interesting because it showed what our lifestyle was like. And because a lot of us had gone through the Top Gun school, they allowed us to be extras. And if you look at the movie, you'd have to stop, which I have done, and take in cuts of that. And so I'm in the background, and then Scarrett and Tom Cruise and those folks were in the foreground, obviously. So that was my claim to fame. I was a extra in the movie Top Gun, but it was interesting. But at the time, I really didn't think much of it until they told my parents that I was in the movie. Now all of a sudden, wow, you were in the movie. That is awesome. So up to that point, they really didn't know anything about the Navy. They kind of followed my career, but the movie, and I can tell you how many people I flew with as a captain at the major airline, that these first officers saw that movie, and that's why they became a pilot.
The film Top Gun resulted in the Navy increasing recruiting by 500% at that time. So you certainly had a great portion to play there. Can you give us a little insight what it was like? I mean, we see the movie and we see the actors portraying the real lives of you type folks that are naval aviators who have gone through that incredible school. But tell us what you can about those actors that leave an impression with you as, I mean, they're not fighter pilots, but they are actors, and here they are trying to portray you folks.
I thought they did a fantastic job, awesome job. But they were, a lot of them were young, had not been in many movies. And so they kind of keyed off of our personas, and they portrayed us really well, except for the volleyball scene. I wasn't real crazy about that one. I should have been Air Force. But
Hey, wait a minute.
but anyway, they did a great job. I met all the male actors. I was in the graduation scene, and the two actors that I really wanted to meet were not in that scene.
And who were those two?
Kelly McGillis and Meg Ryan.
Who can blame you for not wanting to,
I
wanting to meet them?
I know. But anyway, that was quite an experience meeting all those guys. But they did a great job portraying us.
Now, after the Navy, what did you do?
Well, after the Navy, well, just before I got out of the Navy, I had applied to United Airlines. And the admiral at PMTC asked me to be his executive assistant. He said, Bill, I'll make an honest assessment. You'll be a 06 by the time you finish.
So captain is in the captain bird is waiting for you.
Well, that's what he said. And I really wanted to work for the admiral, but I'd already been hired by United. So I looked at it and said, well, if I work for the admiral, I won't fly. If I work for United, that'll be my job. So I think I made the right decision, although it would have been great working for Admiral Newman. He was a good guy, CEO of the Blue Angels, and he's now passed away, rest his soul.
You'd said something about you made a PBY as a kid. That was that plane that landed on water, correct?
It was.
Did you ever get the chance to do a water landing with an aircraft that's built to do that?
No, I never have. I was thinking about getting a seaplane rating. I got a lot of different ratings, but a seaplane rating was one of the ones I thought would be really fun to get. But I didn't do that.
Tell us about the most challenging time in aviation that you ever had. Because they say that flying is hours and hours of boredom interrupted by moments of sheer shocking moments.
Well, I was alerted on a Bear bomber, Russian Soviet bomber, coming in toward the carrier. So off the catapult, lit the burners, quick turn, and out to meet this airplane about 100 to 150 miles away from the carrier. So I'm flying on his wing, and we're giving each other some jazz. And he tried to slap my canopy with his wingtip, and I wasn't real happy about that. So I did a maneuver and snuffed one of my motors. So now I'm blue water ops, which meant the only place you can land is out on the carrier. But I still wasn't going to give in to this guy, so I got as fast as I could on one motor, and I thumped him. And thumping is where you go fast and you pull up right in front of him. And he hasn't seen that, and he goes right through your wash. So now I'm blue water ops, and I'm flying back to the carrier single engine because I couldn't get it started again, and that's the only place I can land. And I'm getting low on fuel. But luckily, we had great LSOs, landing safety officer or signal officers, and so they talked me aboard. So I get aboard, single engine, didn't have to use the barricade or anything. But that was probably one of the more exciting, other than I stepped out of an airplane. The airplane stopped flying, and this was about 3 weeks before I was supposed to get married. So I didn't know what happened at the time. Punched out, get home out of the hospital, and I think my fiance is going to say, "Hi, honey, how was your day?" And she goes, "You're not getting out of this marriage that easy." And I'm going, she can joke about that. She's a keeper. And that was almost 50 years ago. But what happened with the airplane, it had that problem twice before in the same area, and we were the first crew to survive it.
Wow. Glad we've got you with us.
Thank you.
Well, what we say here on Veterans Corner Radio is our veterans are worth their value in gold. And you certainly, with gold wings, the naval aviator, and then some, you far exceed that standard. We've been speaking with retired United States Navy Commander Bill Kirkpatrick, a.k.a. Bullet. Bullet, thank you very much for your service, for sharing your stories and your experiences. And what have you got planned for the future?
Well, I'm retired, and I plan to participate in veterans organizations, give back that way. I also volunteer flying occasionally, not very often anymore, but I also drive a patrol car for the local patrol service.
Well, thanks for all you're doing as you continue representing our veterans' careers and things like that.
Thank you, Joe. Appreciate it.
You've been listening to Veterans Corner Radio with your host, retired United States Air Force Lieutenant Colonel Joe Mulberger. The views expressed on this program are those of Joe and his guests and are opinions based on the best available information. In matters of law or governmental regulation, it will always be best to check with the appropriate agency. Thanks for listening, and we hope you'll join us for the next program on Veterans Corner Radio.